I've been thinking about this homeless crisis we've got going here in the city of Portland, Oregon. I guess you could say I've still been thinking about it. And I've been pointing out that we're not really dealing with the problem very effectively by just moving homeless people from place to place when they set up a tent city that has to be moved because of neighborhood complaints. It's not really solving the problem. And if you want further evidence that it's not solving the problem, let me use as Exhibit a location under a bridge here near my house, which is out near the Portland Airport in the northeast part of the city of Portland. 82nd Street goes under a bridge that has Halsey Street going over, and that bridge has been a wonderful magnet for quaint little tent cities to pop up, and they pop up periodically, sometimes a dozen tents down there until somebody complains, and then we come in and we predictably move them aside after giving them a warning, and the place is all clean and tidy for a few days, and then the whole process repeats. Well, somebody figured out a way to deal with it so that the process doesn't repeat. They have taught, and I don't know who brought these in, but some of the officials have brought in hundreds and hundreds of very big rocks and scattered them all over the landscape underneath the bridge. There ain't going to be no tent cities in that under that bridge anymore, unless you can figure out a way to sleep on a rock. That's really not going to be the place for you. So, problem solved. Wrong, because the same thing is true that's always been true when we've moved people out from one place to another without another alternative. Those folks who have been living under the bridge at 82nd and Halsey are coming to a neighborhood near you because they still don't have a roof over their heads, and they're still going to be looking for a place to camp. Nope, we still haven't solved the problem. We haven't even come close to making a move that will mitigate the problem while we try to figure out how to do something more permanent. So, as you know, I've been suggesting that the first thing we need to do is designate some places around the city where people who are homeless can be on a semi-personal, permanent basis. Furthermore, we need to provide hard-walled tents, essentially, what I've been calling minimally adequate transitional shelters, that is MATs, for these folks to be in. Now, my justification for suggesting this wild plan is simply this. We need to apply the standard of the serenity prayer and the standard of comparative advantage. We all know what the serenity prayer is. Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Well, if we apply this standard to the homeless crisis here in Portland, the poor we always have with us. And that seems to be fairly plain at this point. And so that's something that we're not likely to be able to change, at least not in the short term. So what we're going to have to do is recognize that there are certain things that we maybe have to have the courage to do. And one of those things is to provide an alternative for the people that are homeless so that we can get to a point where we can absolutely pass a robustly enforced law that says no tents in undesignated areas. We are going to provide a place for you to be on a semi-permanent basis, and we are going to provide a roof over your head, and hopefully that will buy us all enough time to humanely take care of this situation until we find something more permanent. So that's been my suggestion. Last time I suggested some places where we might look to be able to create designated areas for these places to be, along with a portable toilet and a garbage can and sharps containers for a village of mats. But now the question is, what should these mats look like? Here's a picture of a couple. Now, these aren't the tiny homes that you see some people living in that are actually quite nice. These are basic, very basic, just a half step up from the street, almost literally. Now, the thing that they have to be is they have to be cheap and they have to be simple to construct because we're going to need a lot of them, and we're going to need a lot of them soon. So they have to be cheap, they have to be simply designed so that they can be constructed by various people who might volunteer actually to do it. What about high school industrial arts classes? What about retired persons who recognize the gravity of the situation? What about certain businesses around town or nonprofits that might be able to join in to get this problem on the way to being solved? So they need to be simple. They need to be cheap. They need to be able to be built for $1,000, let's say. When you look at the $3.6 million we spent in the last couple of years, or in the last year, I guess, to move people from place to place only to have them pop up somewhere else, that's somewhere around 3,000 mats for the same amount of money that we might be spending to do something that really solves no problems. So they need to be simple, they need to be easily constructed, and they need to be cheaply designed. They're just going to be basic shelter, minimally adequate is the term I've been using. Now, secondly, they need to be built in such a way that they're portable. I have referenced earlier in one of my other segments the portable on-demand storage units that you see. U-Haul does it, Pods does it. They're loadable onto a flatbed truck with a forklift. That's what these things need to be designed to be able to do, because we need to be able to move them about if a designated area becomes unavailable and another area does become available. So they have to be portable. We might be able to design some of them to be modular so that they can be pressed together if there happens to be a family that needs a shelter and needs to be closer together. I don't know whether that would be practical or workable or even necessary, but it's something worth considering. Finally, one of the design qualification needs to be that the materials can be dismantled and repurposed, so there's little waste if, by the grace of God and a little ingenuity, we manage to get people in more permanent housing so that they don't need mats anymore. So that's my suggestion as far as how the things ought to be constructed. As far as the place where they ought to be sited, I think there needs to be certain restrictions that we're going to have to place on those designated mats villages. And one of them is you can't store anything outside. If you've got stuff to store, you need to keep it inside the mats shelter that you're in. And outside there can be one, maybe two working bicycles. No bicycle chop shops outside your mats shelter, your minimally adequate transitional shelter. So there are certain requirements that we'll have to enforce. But that's my suggestion. Designated areas, robustly enforced anti-camping regulations, simple, cheap, weatherproof housing, so that we can get, hopefully, social services to people who desperately need help with their drug issues and whatever issues, mental health issues that they're dealing with. If we can put people in designated areas so that they can receive the services that they so desperately need, we'll be on our way to coming up with a more permanent solution. Now, I've pointed out that the standards are these. We've got to recognize what we can't change and change the way what we can. We also need to keep the standard in our minds of comparative advantage. It may not be a good standard. It may not be a good solution. Living in what amounts to plywood tents is not something that we would want anybody to have to do. But I will have to say this. It's comparatively advantageous. It's better than what's being done now. Now, I might have one more segment in this little batch of I've Been Thinking episodes. I'm not sure yet. I'll give that some thought. But in the meantime, is there somebody out there that might be able to help kick something like this off so that we can start making a move to change things? Not 2 years from now, maybe not even 1 year from now, but maybe now. See you next time.